Luke 5. We'll note first in our guide, the outline, Luke 5 verses 1 to 11, Jesus calls fishermen as his first disciples. And we note the parallel passage to that in Matthew and Mark, and we will for several of these incidents, or most of them, that Matthew and Mark tell us the same things. We have the cleansing of a leper in verse 12 through verse 16. We have in the middle of chapter 5, verse 17 to 26, the healing of a paralyzed man being both forgiven and healed. That is most famous to us in Mark chapter 2, because in Mark chapter 2, what exciting detail is added there? In Mark 2, where there's a paralyzed man healed. That's the ceiling fella. So we normally go to Mark 2 for this because of that. It's mentioned here in Luke as well. But for some reason, maybe it's just me, but for some reason we normally we get that from Mark 2, maybe just because it's so close and easy to find at the beginning of the gospel. And then the question, or after the call of Levi, then we have a question about fasting. And that is the only one of the incidents of Luke 5 not covered in the other synoptic gospels, not covered by Matthew and Mark. On our key points here for chapter 5, we have Simon, James, and John. That's our fishermen of the first story, leaving everything to follow Jesus, the incident of the healing and forgiving of the paralytic man, and also this is one of the places where Jesus directly addresses fasting. Of course, also with that, the explanation, which is that he gives, including about old and new wineskins. That's a thing that many people have wondered exactly what that is and how that exactly applies, and what other lessons can we learn from that? So it's kind of an enigmatic ending to chapter 5. All right, so that's going to be our study. Those will be our main points. We're going to start with the fishermen called so that they would follow after Jesus. Before we do that, is there any questions or comments generally or about things we really need to look out for, you think, in chapter 5, or did we leave anything unfinished with chapter 4? All right, so we have like so many things with Jesus, just kind of almost surreal thing. We have so many people, again, pressing, and pressing crowds are a very notable part of Jesus' early ministry. We have the pressing crowds, and Jesus is right on the edge of Lake Gennesaret. Now, what do we usually call Lake Gennesaret? The Sea of Galilee. So we'll have several names for several of these things. So what's one danger if you've got a whole bunch of people pressing up to you on the beach? Or where there's these little fishing docks or whatever structures there were. What's one of the problems you'll have if people press you when you have a body of water on one side? Yeah, you're going to get wet. You're going to quickly run out of room. And so there's several of the times when Jesus teaches to large crowds, like the Sermon on the Mount. It seems that there was most likely some kind of natural amphitheater there. Or when Jesus feeds the 5,000 over on the other side of the sea, the geography of that place was such that there'd be these large hillsides, which kind of, again, form natural amphitheaters. We don't really have one of those right here next to the water. And so there's a couple of boats at the edge of the lake. And when Jesus was there, the fishermen, they were there washing their nets. So they had fished all night. But what do we know about them having fished all night? Fished all night, but they caught no fishes. That's how we have to say it, right? Because the children's Bible song. So they'd fished all night to no effect. they're washing their nets as Jesus is there, and he tells them, put down your nets. And what do they say? Yeah, we've been doing that. And there's a couple of occasions where they fished all night. And so I've been told by commentators, and I don't know how the commentators know, except other commentators told them, but evidently it's quite common that they had a lot of nighttime fishing. So I don't know if that was a seasonal thing. I don't know if that was what they did all the time. But, in John 21, we start with a night of fishing. So they're doing their normal thing. They have done their fishing. They are washing their nets, which means we are done for the night or done for the day. We've worked the night shift. It's time to go home. And what does Simon say? All right, Master, Lord, if you, as you say, because you say, we're going to do this. So it seems from the fact that of what Peter says to him, and the fact that what had Jesus just done for Peter in the last chapter? Healed his mother-in-law, right? And so if a man heals people in your family, and it appears that Peter and the others are already disciples of Jesus at this point. Jesus did not meet them on this morning, did he? No, he's already been at their house. He's already healed members of the family. And so they have enough respect for him to do it because he said so. Now, normally, I don't think the fishermen probably took a lot of fishing advice from carpenters, right? You carpenters, what happens when the fishermen show up and tell you how to carpentry? I thanks, appreciate that. Right, we'll keep on doing what we're doing. But they know Jesus. They already know him as a teacher. And so they let down the nets. And they capture an amazing number of fish. So much so it says that the nets began to tear. They bring in their partners. And they try to help bring it all in. It's so many fish. It is so many fish that the boats begin to sink. So that's a pretty good haul. How did Jesus know those fish were there? He's the creator. Yeah. It's obvious miracle. The only reason I ask is I have seen some really silly naturalistic explanations for how Jesus knew this. But the amount of times that Jesus shows particular control over this one body of water, I mean, they really ought to. I'm surprised Christians did not rename this thing the Sea of Jesus, right? Because how many times does Jesus do something amazing on this lake? And so this miraculous draught of fishes, they bring in the fish, and Peter says what? Right, depart from me, I'm a sinful man. Now, who do you tell, depart from me because I'm sinful? That's a response you have to God, isn't it? It's almost exactly the response of Isaiah when Isaiah is taken to the throne of God. And he says, I'm not worthy. Jesus here demonstrates this power. Peter says, it's interesting he goes over to him and says that. Now, when Jesus says that, depart from me, for I'm sinful, what if Jesus would have said, okay, you're right, I'm out. As you wish. You're sinful, I won't bother with you anymore. Is he really telling Jesus to go away? Right. Right. It's a statement of humility. It's one of those things where it's not exactly literal, is it? Is he really telling Jesus take off? No.
Well, honestly, if you think, what's the reaction every time someone sees an angel or some other?
It's fear. Yeah.
It's fear, and the fear is because of we are
Right.
not worthy to be in his presence.
Yeah, he just,
I'm not sure it's just an expression of Peter. If he's truly acknowledging him as God or whatever he conceived of the Son
Right.
of God as,
right, he's doing this with absolute fear and trembling, isn't he?
yeah.
The fear and trembling is absolute. I don't think it's an absolute, it's not a completely literal statement of, go away. But it is, because he goes over to him and says it. And then when Jesus, the next verse says, come follow me, what does he do? Right, so he's in total awe of Jesus and his power, of his control of things, and he makes a decision, I'm going to follow him. Now, for all the faults that Peter has, and we'll see him through the Gospels, what's the one thing that he does? He stays with Jesus, doesn't he? He always stays with Jesus. And the worst time that he messes up, which is, the denying Jesus during his trials, what does he do the very next day? He's back with the rest of the disciples, right? And he's back with Jesus as soon as possible. And so he's with Jesus. When Jesus says, follow me, he follows him. And though, it's not always the smoothest of journeys, he is attached to Jesus from here out. When other people over in John 6 say, this is hard, who can listen to it? What does Peter say? When Jesus says, you guys want to leave me too? Where else can we go? And another occasion where Jesus, you have to leave everything to follow me. What is Peter and a couple of the other apostles, what do they say? Hey, we've done that. Jesus said, you're right, you have. And you're blessed. So it's interesting here, this absolute dread, terror, and fear when he recognizes the power of Jesus. And when Jesus says, come follow me, he does it. And so there's that kind of response that what Jesus is doing, there's nothing about this that's usual, right? There's nothing about this that's normal. There's nothing about this that any other religious teacher in Galilee or Judea they're not engendering this kind of reaction to people, are they? Because Jesus is so substantially different than what others were. So, depart from me, I am a sinful man. And then Jesus says, like the angels so often do say, don't be afraid. I'll have you catching men or catching people, be fishers of men, depending on how poetic your translation wants to say that. And he follows Jesus. So that's one thing I think I wish we could do better at showing people Jesus in such a way that they do what Peter does, which is recognizing who Jesus is, being in awe of Jesus, and following him. There's a bit of a parallel. It's not a perfect parallel, but there's a bit of a parallel with another famous story early in the ministry of Jesus in John 4. When Jesus talks to the woman at the well, what's that woman's response? When they get done talking, what is the response to the woman at the well, to Jesus?
Come and see this man who's told me everything I've ever done.
Yeah, come see this guy. So Jesus has this conversation with her, and he didn't even show a miracle except, the knowledge of her situation. He doesn't, it's nothing as grand as boats, sinking fishing boats full of fish, with so many fish, or walking on water or the like. But just telling her what her own condition was. And she says, this man knew everything I ever did. And most of the time, when people are confronted with everything they've ever done, what's their response? It's get away, right? They know all about me. I think I need to go someplace else. This woman's response was, come see him. We need to find out more and be more with this man. And so that ends up being the response here as well. In awe of Jesus, they follow Jesus. And so presenting Jesus in this way, in all his awe and all the miraculous might and divine character that he had. That's our message in the gospel, isn't it? When we preach Christ, what are we supposed to preach? That Jesus, right? That Jesus who knows us, that Jesus who has the power, that Jesus who loved us enough to die for us, such that then when there's the call to follow, there's following. All right, so that's where we have our first story, the call of the fishermen, Simon Peter, James, and John. We'll find out from another case that it's most likely that James and John were relatives of Jesus, most likely his cousins. We kind of find out that tidbit through some things in the when it lists all the ladies who were at the crucifixion, and it lists his mother's sister, and it lists Salome in another gospel, and also why their mother, James and John's mother, would be asking Jesus at the end of his ministry, hey, can you give my two boys favored places in your kingdom? Because if your cousin's about to be in charge of a kingdom, what are you hoping for? Good place, right? And so that explains why their mother was involved. So Jesus knew these men. He has a relationship with them before. They've heard his teaching. They've been with him to some of the things that he's already done. And now they follow him full time. Okay, so as they're going about then, we have a leper that is cleansed in our next story. Anything else on the fishermen before we go on from that?
I keep going back to the book of John, where there is in chapter 2 where Christ has performed these miracles, turn the water to wine, and then other things. That people were believing on him, but they weren't ready yet to commit to him. And he knew that they weren't, that a lot of people weren't ready yet to just openly follow him and to accept him and to commit to him. And I'm wondering if Peter was in a similar situation, but in this catch of a fish, was that enough to finally for him to say, yes, I believe, and I'm also going to commit to follow you and leave my everyday occupation, leave it aside, and I will follow you.
Yeah, I would think that this would help. This would help cement the mind that this is really the guy. All right, so these three fishermen leave their partnership, their fishing partners. So they leave this, and other gospels will tell us about Zebedee, the father of James and John, and there were servants that he had. So there's a fishing business, a profitable fishing business that is left behind. Of course, in John 21, 3 years from now, after the death of Jesus, what were the majority of the disciples doing while waiting on Jesus to appear up with them in Galilee? They were right back here with these same boats in this same place, and they were doing some fishing. And then after that short break, while between Jesus' resurrection and ascension and the things of Pentecost, then they got right back to preaching the gospel full time. All right, so we have a man cleansed of leprosy. Now, we just already had, didn't we? We just already had Jesus when he was in the last chapter, when he was at Nazareth at the synagogue. What did he say about healing lepers? He reminded them that even during the whole time that Elisha was there was only one leper cleansed. And we think about the horrific nature of leprosy. And through the scriptures, leprosy is often emblematic of sin. It's a disease that is sometimes compared to sin. It's it's contagious. It was incurable. It was degenerative. It made one an outcast. And I think if you want to press a little bit more, you can probably find a couple other things too. So leprosy was one of the most loathsome and fearsome diseases that they had there in that ancient time. And here Jesus comes, and how hard is it for him to deal with leprosy as compared with any other disease anybody might have? Leprosy is no more a problem than anything else. And so a leper comes up to him. We're not told where in verse 12, but in one of the towns. There was a man who had leprosy. This translation says all over. The old King James will say the man was full of leprosy. And full of leprosy is just about the same today as we'd say a fellow's full of cancer. What's the prognosis of a fellow full of cancer? Not good. And so here is a guy full of or all over with leprosy. So he's in the latter stages of the disease. This would be of all the, there's a lot of, and this is the old use of the word, pathetic. There's a lot of people in pathetic conditions who come to Jesus. And a lot of people in bad conditions that come to Jesus. Of course, I guess there are a couple in worse conditions because he heals a few from the dead, right? But short of resurrecting somebody from the dead, this is about as desperate a situation as anybody has that Jesus deals with. So he's full of, or all over, with leprosy. And he comes and begs, pleads, implores Jesus. He said, Lord, if you're willing, make me clean. Lord, if you're willing, make me clean. And what is it then that it says about him? In some translations, it'll let us know that Jesus was, or should be in Mark. Pardon me, it's in Mark. It's in Mark 1:41, this additional detail that Luke doesn't have. But because Luke gives us the detail about the condition, Mark tells about Jesus. But it says Jesus was moved with compassion. Moved with compassion. Or in Luke it says, I'm willing. So are you willing? And Jesus' words are, I'm willing. And Mark adds the detail that he was moved with compassion, and immediately the leprosy left him. And so you just think about, a man covered up, full up with leprosy. This is not just a surface condition, is it? This is part of the terrible thing about leprosy is, the whole body, the parts of the body affected, they would just kind of stiffen up and become almost like leather. And it would just be a deadness that went all the way down, sometimes get into the bones and start eating away at the bones. But there's just a deadness to the skin, and there's a deadness to the muscles below. I mean, this is a thoroughgoing deal. And every bit of his flesh is made perfectly well in just the instant with Jesus saying, I'm willing, be clean. And so be clean. Let this leave you. And so here is the compassion of Jesus. Now, I have to say, this is a point when it comes to miracles in the last few years, I've emphasized more and more the compassionate nature of miracles. Because, pardon me, how many things is it that miracles accomplish? It takes care of the problem, and it builds faith too, right? And in John 5, the sermon we had just a couple weeks ago, what testified to the claims of Jesus? The works, right? He said, if you don't believe me, believe on account of the works. And so there's a faith building or faith causing, faith confirming aspect of miracles, right? And what's one of the stated purposes of miracles from Hebrews 2? also from Mark 16. In both those places, what does it say that miracles do? I'm sorry, Steve? Yeah. Yes, we often say using the words from the King James in Mark 16, these signs followed, they confirmed the word, right? Or it was confirmed to those of us who heard by miracles. So there's a confirming aspect to miracles. So when Jesus makes these amazing claims of things, how can we believe such claims as Jesus made? By faith and by the fact he's got these miracles. Right? A little bit later, well, actually the next story, Jesus is going to forgive a man's sins. Now, can anybody see that? No. And Jesus promises to forgive our sins, right? Can we see that? Well, how would we believe it? We trust what he says, right? Why can we trust what he says? Because as he went about saying these things, what did he do? He did miracles, right? And so that's the confirming aspect of miracles. But as well as being a confirming aspect of miracles of what Jesus says, there's also this which is revealed in this verse, which is the compassionate aspect of miracles. So, and this is in Scripture too, what is the summary of the work of Jesus that Peter tells Cornelius? You know about Jesus, how he what? Acts 10:38. You know about Jesus, how he went about. All right, somebody read it for me. Acts 10:38. I really hope I remember that right after making such a point of it, but I think I did.
How God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Spirit with power, and went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil, for God was with him.
All right, he went about doing good. He went about doing good. And what would the man who got healed of leprosy say? Man, he sure did me good, right? And so he goes about doing good and healing. And so there's this compassionate, helpful, and good aspect of the work and actions of Jesus. So it's a confirming thing. It's also what? It's a good and helpful thing. So it's good and helpful. It wasn't just that, I need somebody to confirm my word. Who's handy, right? Here's a guy in real need. And why is it that people rejoice so much when he does these miracles? Well, partly they see the work of God, but partly the people who receive the miracles need them so badly. Because what's this guy's other hope? Nothing in this world, right? Nothing in this life. So there is a doing good or compassionate aspect, a healing aspect. There's a confirming aspect. And also, as we talked about with leprosy often being emblematic of sin, often with miracles, there's an emblematic aspect. Why is it important that Jesus can make physically lame people be able to walk? What does that teach us? That he can make lame walk. Right, that's true. But, that he can make them stand, walk, jump, right? Or how about he can make blind people see? There's prophecies of those things, right? So he does answer prophecy. But what does he do with us spiritually? Can he make the lame to walk? Can he make the blind to see? Can he make the deaf to hear? Can he make the dumb to speak? So there's an emblematic aspect of these miracles too, showing in physical aspect what Jesus is also doing in spiritual reality. So there's quite a bit going on with these miracles, aren't there? And I don't think we're overreading in any way by saying that we got at least three good things going on with these miracles. So we've got, and of course, all of it causing glory to God, right? Of course, the most hardened, what do they say? He does it by the power of the demons, but just shows how corrupt they are. So there may be even a revealing aspect of miracles, revealing the hearts of men. So we've got this terribly, terribly ill, sick man. He says, if you're willing. And what does Jesus say? Of course I'm willing. He said, I'm willing to be made well, because he's compassionate for that guy. And so we had just in the last chapter a comparison of the Old Testament of just how few lepers were healed. But what do we find Jesus doing all through the Gospels? Healing lepers, no problem. Yeah, regular part of the ministry. And so if we wanted to make any kind of comparison between Jesus and the former prophets, there is no comparison, right? I mean, it's amazing. Isn't it great and amazing Elijah healed a leper? Oh, absolutely. But what about Jesus healing scores of lepers? So there's no comparison in the former prophets and the Messiah. Of course, what would you expect the Messiah to do if he's really the Messiah? Wouldn't you expect him to surpass all the prophets in teaching and miracles and effect? You would expect the Messiah to supersede them, and he does easily. So go show yourself to the priest and offer to what Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. Notice that there's a testimonial part of this now that goes to the priest. So this leper is going to go to the priest. And why was it that Moses told people to go to the priest? What did that accomplish? It proves you're cleansed. The priest would pronounce you unclean, and if you were healed, what would the priest pronounce? He'd pronounce clean, and you'd give a sacrifice of thanksgiving. But the priest was in charge of, the control of this contagion. The priest was in charge of the quarantine, and the priest was in charge of lifting the quarantine. And so this man is going to be, with this, performing this rite, he'll be accepted back into society. And, he shows up at his hometown. Everybody's like, hold on, what's Tim doing here? Wasn't Tim a leper? What can Tim go? I got my thing from the priest. Priest stamped it. I got my papers. I'm out of quarantine. I'm out of isolation. I'm good. And how'd that happen? Well, Jesus. But it's also here a testimony to the priest. It's a testimony to them. So by doing this, what is Jesus doing regarding the priest? He's letting them know somebody's dealing with leprosy out there, right? Because, again, we'll just assume this guy's name is Tim for sake of this discussion. Did the local priest know Tim? I mean, do they know the local lepers? Part of their job, right? And now Tim shows up, and he doesn't have leprosy anymore. And last we knew it, when we were putting out the food for the lepers to come get, who's been there for years? Tim, whatever his name is. Tim's been there for years. All of a sudden, Tim's healed. How did Tim get healed? Would that be a question for the priest to ponder, wouldn't it? Why is this man no longer on the leper rolls? How is this man walking around? And also, he's being told to follow the law. So there is a testimony there of Jesus' respect for the law to the priest. But mainly it's a testimony to the local religious authorities. Somebody's out here dealing with leprosy. And so, verse 15, kind of an understatement. Yeah, news spread more and more. And the crowd showed all the more to come and be healed of their sicknesses. Well, I would guess so. I mean, just imagine. I mean, we've kind of had a bad year with disease in our country. But imagine if we had somebody who was truly and really dealing with COVID. And word got out, this guy's healing people. He healed my mother-in-law, right? Hey, you should go see him too. Well, I heard that over there in that town, he healed 20 or 30 people. How long would the line of cars be? Well, here in the ancient world, how long does the line of people become? As people flock to hear Jesus and to be healed of their sickness. So, the miracles are having that effect of bringing out the word. Bringing out the word of God. All right. So that's the man with leprosy. Questions, comments? Right.
And this is what he said to Christ. If it be your will, let this be done. When Christ had compassion, that he was willing, as a clean Jew, to touch this unclean man.
That's true. I did not mention that. Yeah, he touched him. Yes.
That in being violating at least the tradition, but touching this unclean man, but yet he was willing to do it and loose him from his infirmity, make him a productive person in society, in his own family.
Right. Yep.
His compassion did not stop with this man's uncleanness.
Yeah, and we might also make the point, if we combine what Peter said with this man said, Lord, if you're willing, make me clean from sin, right? Peter says, I'm a sinner. And in that is the, implicit, if you're willing, cleanse me. Yeah, I did not mention the touching. I don't know why. I've seen the last few months a number of things about Princess Diana. It might be a round number anniversary of her death. I'm not sure why. But there was a famous picture of her that somebody resurfaced, and I saw it a couple of weeks ago. It was Princess Diana visiting an AIDS hospital, one of the earliest ones in London. And it was just after they had figured out the mechanism by which AIDS spread. And they found out it was not by casual contact. And she, when she was visiting this AIDS hospital, there was an AIDS patient, and she shook hands with the man. He's in a wheelchair. He's in obviously very poor shape, but he's able to sit in a wheelchair and greet the princess when she came. And she shakes hands with him without wearing gloves. And there's a picture of this, and it became a kind of a international news story that she would touch somebody with AIDS without wearing gloves. And like I say, it had just been very recently discovered that actually probably was a very safe thing to do. But most people at the time she did that, they didn't believe it. So the fact that she touched somebody was with that disease at that point in time, in historical moment, was considered to be very forward-thinking and very compassionate and very kind, and it made news. Well, in this case, when Jesus heals this man with leprosy, what is the state of leprosy? And even today, would you touch a guy with leprosy? Yeah. Could I double glove, please? But Jesus' power over leprosy is such that there's no chance of contagion going to Jesus. What there is Jesus' healing going to the man. So,
Probably the first time anybody had touched him in years.
intentionally, yeah. Yeah, unless it was some other leper. Yeah, so this man's life is restored by the compassion and power of Jesus. And like we say, isn't that emblematic of the whole exercise? Right? Life is set right and restored by the power and compassion of Jesus.